Marcus was 36 years old, a city paramedic in Charlotte, and he made exactly $58,450 a year before taxes. On this particular Monday morning at 5:12 a.m., he was sitting in his 2012 Toyota Camry, a car with 187,000 miles on the odometer and a persistent rattle in the passenger side door. And he was about to set his entire life on fire, just to see what would grow from the ashes. The plan was simple, brutal, and born of 1,000 tiny cuts. He would disappear for 1 week. He had packed a single duffel bag, a plain black $40 canvas affair he'd had since his EMT training. Inside were 3 changes of clothes, his toothbrush, and a worn paperback copy of a Stoic philosophy book. He wasn't going far, just across town to his partner Derek's spare bedroom, a cramped space that smelled faintly of stale pizza and gym socks. He had cleared the time with his supervisor, cashing in a week of accumulated vacation days under the guise of a family emergency. The only person who wouldn't know where he was his wife, Simone. He looked at the house, the one his grandmother had left him. It was a modest brick ranch, maybe 1,400 square feet, on a quiet street in the University City area. It was his only real asset, fully paid off, a piece of his family's legacy. Inside that house, Simone was asleep in their shared queen-sized bed, a $1,200 memory foam mattress he'd bought 2 years ago on a payment plan. He imagined her there, her beautiful face serene in the pre-dawn gloom, her deep brown skin looking soft against the white cotton sheets. He felt a pang of something, not love, not anymore, but the ghost of it, a hollow echo in a place that used to be full. This test, this self-imposed exile, felt like the only way to find out if that echo was all that was left. He had become a stranger in his own home, a walking ATM whose only function was to fund a life he was barely a part of. The signs had been there for years, small flags of disrespect that he dutifully ignored. But the final straw had been a quiet comment she'd made last Tuesday, a line dropped with the casual cruelty that had become her signature. He'd been talking about applying for a promotion, a captain position that would add another $12,000 to his salary but would mean more administrative work. He was hesitant. "I don't know, Cy. It's a big leap." She hadn't even looked up from her phone, scrolling through what was probably a $2,400 Burberry dress on Neiman Marcus's website. "Mark, you've been talking about that for a year. You were always a quitter. Some men just aren't." The unspoken comparison hung in the air, thick and suffocating. The name she didn't say was Trey. He drove a white BMW 3 Series, a $43,000 car he leased, and worked in some vague finance job that she always described as very important. Marcus knew he was more than a friend. The late-night texts she tried to hide, the sudden need for girls' nights that stretched into the early morning. This week was not about catching her. In his gut, he already knew. This week was about confirmation. It was about seeing, with his own 2 eyes, what happened when the quiet, reliable man with the $89 Timex watch and the steady paycheck finally stopped coming home. He sent one last text message to her phone, timing it for 6:30 a.m., when her alarm usually went off. "Need some time to clear my head. Don't know when I'll be back." He turned the key in the ignition. The Camry's engine coughed to life, and he drove away from the only home he'd ever known, the rising sun, a pale, indifferent smear in his rearview mirror. He had no idea that the answer he was looking for would be more devastating than he could ever have imagined. Have you ever felt so invisible in your own life that you had to vanish just to see if anyone would notice? Let me know in the comments if you've ever reached that breaking point. The facade of their domestic life had been constructed with care, mostly by Marcus. It was a life built on small acts of service, the quiet language of a man who showed love through deeds, not words. Every morning at 5 a.m., before his shift, He would make coffee. Not for himself, he drank the sludge at the station, but for her. He used the French press she'd insisted they needed, a sleek $80 Bodum model, and the expensive, ethically sourced coffee beans she liked, which cost $22 a bag from the local market on North Tryon Street. He'd leave a full mug on the kitchen counter, right next to her car keys and her $1,200 Louis Vuitton handbag. It was a small ritual, a silent "I love you" that he suspected she no longer heard. Their weekends were a study in contrast. His idea of a good Saturday was working in the yard, tending to the azaleas his grandmother had planted, his hands covered in the rich North Carolina soil. He'd wear his old, paint-splattered jeans and a faded t-shirt from a 5K he'd run years ago. Simone would spend her Saturdays at South Park Mall, a temple of high-end retail. She'd return in the late afternoon, the back of her used, but still pricey Lexus RX 350, a $35,000 vehicle he was helping make the payments on, filled with glossy shopping bags. "I just got a few things," she'd say, breezing past him as she carried in a new pair of $700 Jimmy Choo heels or a $450 silk blouse from Tory Burch. He remembered their 3rd anniversary dinner last year. He had saved for 2 months to take her to the Fig Tree, a fine dining restaurant in a restored 1913 craftsman bungalow. The bill, with a modest bottle of wine, came to $287. He had paid with his credit card. Feeling a flush of pride, he'd wanted to give her a night of elegance. As they were leaving, she'd squeezed his arm. "That was sweet, Mark, really. It's cute how you try." The word "cute" landed like a slap. It was the same tone she used when a child tried to do a grown-up's job. It was condescending, a pat on the head that was meant to feel like an insult. He saw then that his grand gesture was to her a quaint little effort, an imitation of a life she felt she truly deserved, a life he could never afford to give her. The house itself was another point of contention. To Marcus, it was sacred. It was the place his mother grew up, where he'd spent Christmases and Thanksgivings. He could still see the faint pencil marks on the door frame in the hallway, charting his growth from a small boy into a towering young man. The hardwood floors, which he had personally refinished for a cost of $1,500 in materials and a week of backbreaking labor, creaked with the weight of family history. To Simone, the house was a starter home they were stuck in. "We could sell this place for maybe $300,000, she'd said one evening, swirling a glass of $40 Pinot Noir. "If we combined that with a real mortgage, we could get a proper house in Ballantyne, something with a 2-car garage and a bonus room." "This is my grandmother's house, Si," Marcus had said, his voice quiet. "It's my home." "It's old, Mark. The kitchen is dated. The bathroom tiles are hideous." She gestured vaguely at the perfectly functional kitchen, with its clean, white appliances that had cost him a combined $2,500 from Lowe's. "It's just not us." He knew what she meant. It wasn't her. It didn't match the image she projected to her friends. The successful, sophisticated woman married to, well, she usually glossed over what he did for a living. "He's in the medical field," she'd say, a technically true but deliberately vague description that stripped his job of its grit and reality. It made him sound like a doctor or a pharmaceutical rep, not a man who spent 12-hour shifts responding to car wrecks on I-85 and heart attacks in third-floor walk-ups. He was the man who held a stranger's hand in their final moments, but to his own wife he was just a man with a cute, inadequate house. The decision to stage his disappearance wasn't a sudden snap. It was a slow erosion of his spirit, a death by 1,000 paper cuts. The insults had become more frequent, the cruelty more overt, always wrapped in a veneer of plausible deniability. It was the accumulation of these moments that pushed him to the edge. There was the incident at her company's holiday party 2 months prior, It was held at a swanky hotel ballroom uptown, a place with $20 cocktails and glittering chandeliers. Marcus, in his best and only suit, a charcoal gray number he'd bought for $450 at Belk, felt out of place among the sea of finance guys in their $3,000 Tom Ford suits. Simone had introduced him to her boss, a slick, silver-haired man named Richard. "Richard, this is my husband Marcus." Richard had shaken his hand with a grip that was all about dominance. "Good to meet you. Simone is a real asset to our team, a killer instinct." "She's amazing," Marcus had agreed, genuinely proud. Later, as they were getting drinks, he overheard Simone talking to a coworker, a woman dripping in David Yurman jewelry that probably cost more than his car. "Oh, Mark is just so steady," Simone had said, her voice laced with something that sounded like pity. "He's a paramedic. It's noble, I guess. But it's not exactly ambitious. He's comfortable." The word comfortable was an indictment. It meant stagnant, unambitious, a man who had peaked. He felt his face burn with shame. He was a man who saved lives for a living, and his wife was apologizing for him. Then there was the money. It wasn't just her spending, it was her attitude about his income. He made a decent living, more than the national average, but in her world, it was laughably small. They kept separate bank accounts, a decision she had insisted on early in their marriage. He paid the mortgage, which was zero, but he covered the $3,200 annual property taxes and insurance, the utilities, and the groceries. She paid for her car, her clothes, and her lifestyle. But her money never seemed to be enough. "Babe, my Amex bill is insane this month," she'd sigh, looking at him expectantly. "I had to buy that new suit for the conference. It was a $1,500 investment in my career." And Marcus, wanting to be a supportive husband, would transfer $500 from his savings account to hers. It happened almost every month. He was subsidizing her luxury with his sweat and overtime shifts. The final and most cutting betrayal was about family. His mother, a proud, church-going black woman with a spine of steel, had been wary of Simone from the start. "She looks at you, Marcus, but she doesn't see you," his mother had told him a week before the wedding. He had dismissed it as a mother's protectiveness. He was wrong. Last month, his mother had a health scare. She needed a minor but urgent procedure, and she was scared. Marcus had taken a day off to be with her at the hospital. He had called Simone that morning. "Hey, I'm at the hospital with Mom. Everything's going to be fine, but she's nervous. Could you maybe stop by after work? Just for a little while? It would mean the world to her." "Oh, honey, I'd love to, but I'm swamped," Simone had said, her voice distracted. "We have this huge deadline, and Trey and I are leading the project. I'll probably be here until 9. Just give your mom my love." Trey. She hadn't even tried to hide it. She was choosing to work late on a project with the man he suspected she was sleeping with over sitting with his sick mother for 30 minutes. When he got home that night, exhausted and emotionally drained, he found a receipt on the kitchen counter. It was from a restaurant called La Belle Hélène, a trendy French place downtown. It was a dinner receipt for 2, time-stamped at 7:45 p.m. The total was $198. She hadn't been working late. She had been on a date. He felt the floor drop out from under him. The lie was so blatant, so careless. She didn't even respect him enough to cover her tracks. That night, lying in bed next to her, he felt a cold clarity settle over him. She didn't love him. She didn't respect him. She was using him. She was waiting for him to either become the man she wanted or for a better option to become permanent. He realized she saw him as a placeholder, a comfortable stopgap. And in that moment, the plan began to form. He wasn't a quitter. He was a paramedic. He was trained to assess a situation calmly, gather information, and then act decisively. He would treat his marriage like a critical patient. He would assess the damage, and he would determine if it was salvageable. He would disappear for a week and see just how long it took for his absence to be filled. He suspected he already knew the answer. The outrage had finally accumulated into a single, sharp point of action. He had to know the truth, no matter how much it destroyed him. Monday, day 1, was a study in silence. Marcus spent the day at Derek's apartment, a second-floor unit in a sprawling complex off W.T. Harris Boulevard. The air was thick with the hum of the overworked window AC unit. He watched the clock, his stomach a tight knot of anxiety. He had sent the text at 6:30 a.m. By 9 a.m., there was still no reply. He checked his phone every 5 minutes, the blank screen a silent accusation. Did she not care? Was she angry? Finally, at 10:17 a.m., his phone buzzed. A text from Simone. "What do you mean you need to clear your head? Where are you? This is very dramatic, Marcus." No concern, no worry, just annoyance. He typed out a reply, his thumbs trembling slightly. "I'm safe. Just need some space." He put the phone down, face down, on the cheap particle board nightstand. He would not respond again. Part of the test was to see what she would do when he went silent. Derek, a broad-shouldered man with kind eyes and a booming laugh, tried to distract him. "Man, forget her for a minute. Let's order a pizza. My treat. A large pepperoni from Hawthorne's, 50-50 on the pineapple." Derek was the only person who knew the full story, the only one Marcus trusted with the raw, humiliating truth. He had listened without judgment, just nodding his head as Marcus laid out the years of quiet indignities. Tuesday, day 2, the silence deepened. No calls, no texts, nothing. Marcus felt a strange mix of dread and vindication. His absence was an inconvenience to her, not a crisis. He spent the day cleaning Derek's apartment, scrubbing the kitchen and bathroom with a frantic energy. He needed to do something with his hands, something productive to keep his mind from spiraling. As he scoured the grout in the shower, he thought about the life he had built, the care he had poured into his home, and his marriage. It felt like he had been tending a garden full of weeds. That evening, his phone rang. It was his mother. Her voice was tight with worry. "Marcus, what is going on? I just got off the phone with Simone." Marcus's blood ran cold. "What did she say, Mom?" "She said you packed a bag and left. She said you abandoned her, that you just walked out without a word. She was crying, Marcus. She sounded hysterical. She said you've been distant and angry for weeks." The lie was breathtaking in its audacity. She was already spinning the narrative, painting herself as the victim, the abandoned wife. She was poisoning the well, turning his own family against him. He felt a surge of cold, hard anger replace the anxiety. "Mom, that's not what happened. I am safe. I just needed some space to think. I promise I will explain everything soon. Can you just trust me?" "Of course I trust you, baby," she said, her voice softening. "But I am worried. Be safe." After he hung up, he sat in the dark for a long time. The game had changed. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. This was about a fundamental cruelty he hadn't fully comprehended. She was trying to destroy his reputation, to isolate him from his support system. She wasn't just disrespecting him, she was trying to erase him and replace him with a villain of her own creation. He had made a critical mistake. He had underestimated the depths of her deception. They had no idea what was coming. Wednesday, day 3. The day the world ended. It happened at 8:47 a.m. Marcus was sitting on Derek's lumpy 10-year-old sofa, drinking a cup of instant coffee that tasted like dirt. He was scrolling aimlessly through his phone when a notification popped up on the screen of his iPad, which he'd brought with him. It was an alert from the security camera app connected to the doorbell camera he'd installed last year. A $199 Ring doorbell he'd bought after a neighbor's car was broken into. The alert read, "Motion detected at your front door." His heart hammered against his ribs. He opened the app. The live feed flickered to life, showing his own front porch in crystal clear high definition. The morning light was soft, filtering through the large oak tree in his front yard. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the front door opened. Simone stepped out. She was wearing a silk robe, one he'd never seen before, a deep emerald green that probably cost at least $300. She was smiling, a wide, genuine smile he hadn't seen directed at him in years. She turned and spoke to someone still inside the house. And then, he stepped out. Trey. He was wearing a pair of gray sweatpants and a t-shirt, looking completely at home. He leaned in and gave Simone a long, lingering kiss. Marcus felt the air leave his lungs, a silent, guttural punch. He was watching his wife kiss another man on the porch of the house his grandmother had left him. But that wasn't the worst of it. What she didn't know was that the camera's microphone was incredibly sensitive. He could hear their voices, tinny but clear. "Is all your stuff in the car?" Simone asked, her voice bright and happy. "Just the last 2 boxes," Trey replied. He walked off the porch and out of the frame. A moment later, he reappeared, walking up the driveway. He was carrying a cardboard box. He was moving in. Marcus stared at the screen, his mind a roaring void. He watched as Trey made a second trip, carrying another box labeled Kitchen. He set it down on the porch, and Simone laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Welcome home, baby," she said. "Welcome home." The words echoed in the silent apartment. Welcome home, to his grandmother's home. It was Wednesday. He had been gone for less than 72 hours, and she had already replaced him, not just in her bed, but in his life. The speed of it was what broke him. There was no grief, no uncertainty. It was a seamless transition, a simple matter of swapping out one man for another, like changing a burned-out light bulb. He felt a profound, chilling numbness spread through his body. The pain was so immense it was almost abstract. It was a physical sensation, a crushing weight on his chest. He closed the iPad. He stood up and walked to the small window that overlooked the apartment complex's parking lot. He saw a young couple getting into a beat-up Honda Civic, the woman laughing as the man tickled her. A normal life, a life he thought he had. The rage came next, not hot and explosive, but cold and sharp, like a shard of glass in his heart. The woman he had vowed to love and cherish was a stranger, a ruthless, calculating stranger who was currently helping her lover arrange his belongings in their kitchen. His kitchen. He thought of the lie she had told his mother, the hysterical, abandoned wife. It was all a performance, a carefully crafted fiction to cover for this premeditated takeover of his life. In that moment, everything shifted. The test was over. The mission had changed. This was no longer about discovery. It was about reclamation. It was about justice. He was not a quitter. He was a paramedic, and he knew exactly how to handle a catastrophic injury. You don't panic. You control the bleeding. You stabilize the patient. And then you execute a plan with cold, methodical precision. He picked up his phone. He didn't call her. He didn't text her. He Googled best divorce attorneys in Charlotte. What would you do if you saw your entire life being given away to someone else on a security camera? The shock, the betrayal. It's a nightmare. Stick with me to see how Marcus turns this devastating moment into the beginning of his triumph. The hours after the discovery were a blur of focused activity. The shock had crystallized into a singular purpose. Marcus was no longer playing the part of a man clearing his head. He was a strategist, gathering munitions for a war he never wanted to fight, but was now determined to win. He spent the rest of Wednesday, day 3, methodically building his case, his grief and rage, channeled into a quiet, devastatingly precise series of actions. His first call was to a law firm uptown, one with a sleek website and stellar reviews. He was connected to a paralegal who took his information. "Mr. Collins, an attorney can see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. Her name is Anita Moore. Her rate is $450 an hour." "Book it," Marcus said without hesitation. The cost was staggering, nearly a week's pay for a single hour, but it was an investment in his future. Next, he began compiling evidence. He sat at Derek's wobbly kitchen table with his laptop, a $600 Dell he'd bought on Black Friday, and started a new folder on his desktop titled Evidence. The first file he saved was the video from the Ring doorbell. He downloaded the entire clip from the moment Simone walked out the door to the moment Trey carried the last box inside. He saved it to his laptop, his iPad, and to a cloud drive. He re-watched it once, forcing himself to see every detail: the casual intimacy of their kiss, the way Trey's hand rested on the small of her back, the triumphant smile on her face. It was brutal, but it was proof. Then he logged into his email and pulled up the records from his work. As a paramedic, every second of his shift was logged by the county's dispatch system. He downloaded his timesheets for the past 6 months, creating a PDF document that showed, with immutable, time-stamped precision, exactly where he was and what he was doing at all times. It was an ironclad alibi against her claim of abandonment. It showed him responding to a multi-car pileup on I-77 while she was at a girls' night. It showed him performing CPR on an elderly man in a North Charlotte apartment while she was sending texts to Trey at 2 a.m. The logs were a secret diary of his life, a testament to his service that would now serve as his shield. On Thursday morning, day 4, Marcus put on his nicest pair of pants and a collared shirt and drove Derek's car, a newer model sedan Derek insisted he take, to the law office on South Tryon Street. The office was on the 28th floor of a glass tower that scraped the sky. The view of the city was panoramic, a world away from the cramped ambulance cab he was used to. Anita Moore was a sharp, impeccably dressed black woman in her late 40s. Her office was minimalist and modern, dominated by a large mahogany desk that probably cost $10,000. She listened intently as Marcus laid out the story, his voice calm and even. He didn't editorialize or get emotional. He simply presented the facts: the long-term disrespect, the financial strain, the suspicious behavior, the lie to his mother, and finally, the video. He slid his iPad across the polished desk. This was yesterday morning at 8:47 a.m. Anita watched the video, her expression unreadable. When it was over, she looked up at him. "She moved another man into the marital home less than 3 days after you left for what she told your mother was an abandonment. This is egregious." She tapped a pen on a legal pad. "The house? What's the situation with the deed?" "It was my grandmother's. She left it to me in her will. Free and clear. The deed was transferred into my name 5 years ago. That was 2 years before Simone and I were married." A slow smile spread across Anita's face. "Mr. Collins, in the state of North Carolina, that makes the house your separate premarital property. She has absolutely no legal claim to it. None." Marcus felt a wave of relief so profound it almost made him dizzy. "So I can make her leave? We can have her and her guest legally removed from the premises by the end of the day tomorrow, if that's what you want?" "That's what I want," Marcus said, his voice firm. They spent the next hour mapping out the strategy, It was Anita who came up with the final, brilliant piece of the plan. She'll likely have changed the locks by now to establish residency and make it harder for you to get back in. See if you can find any evidence of that. A charge on a shared credit card, an email confirmation. That would be proof of her intent to illegally oust you from your own property. As if on cue, a notification popped up on his phone. An email from their joint credit card, the one they only used for household emergencies. Thank you for your payment to ACME Locksmith. Your receipt for $285 is attached. He had been so focused on the video, he hadn't even thought to check. He opened the email. There it was. A receipt for a full rekeying of all exterior locks at his address, dated Wednesday afternoon. He showed the phone to Anita. She read the email and then looked at him, a glint of admiration in her eyes. She just handed us the gun, the bullet, and a signed confession. Mr. Collins, we are going to have a very productive day tomorrow. Marcus left the office feeling 10 feet tall. He had a plan. He had an army of one on his side, and he had the truth. He would spend the rest of Thursday and Friday morning in quiet preparation. He would not go back to his house in anger. He would return on his own terms, at a time of his choosing. He would return on Friday at 6 p.m. at the end of his regularly scheduled shift. He would be in his uniform, a symbol of the steady, reliable man she had so casually discarded. Friday, day 7, the strike. The day began like any other shift. At 6 a.m., Marcus was at the North Charlotte EMS station, running through the morning checklist on his ambulance. He checked the oxygen levels, the drug boxes, the defibrillator pads. The familiar routine was calming, a small island of order in the chaos of his life. He worked a full 12-hour shift. He and Derek responded to 7 calls, a diabetic emergency, a child with a broken arm, a fender bender on the interstate. On each call, he was the consummate professional, calm, compassionate, efficient. No one would have guessed that his entire world had been shattered just 2 days earlier. At 5:30 p.m., he clocked out. He didn't change out of his uniform, the dark blue pants, the crisp collared shirt with the paramedic patch on the sleeve. It was part of the plan. It was his armor. He met the process server, a lanky man named Gary, in the parking lot of a convenience store 2 blocks from his house. Gary had a thick manila envelope in his hand. Inside were the divorce papers, a formal eviction notice, and a temporary restraining order. "You ready?" Gary asked, chewing on a toothpick. "I'm ready," Marcus said. His voice was steady, but his heart was a drum solo against his ribs. He drove the final 2 blocks alone, his Camry rattling a familiar rhythm. He saw it before he even got to the house. Trey's white BMW 3 Series was parked in his driveway. His driveway. A fresh wave of cold fury washed over him, but he pushed it down. Composure was everything. He parked on the street, directly in front of the house. He took a deep breath, the way he did before entering a volatile scene on a call. Assess, don't assume. Control the environment. He got out of the car. Gary pulled up behind him and got out, holding the envelope. They walked up the stone pathway together, 6 p.m. on the dot. As they reached the porch, the front door opened. It was Simone. She was laughing, holding a glass of wine. She was dressed for a night out, wearing a tight black dress that he knew had cost over $600. Her smile froze when she saw him. Her face went through a rapid series of emotions. Confusion, shock, then a flicker of fear. "Marcus? What are you doing here? You thought I was still clearing my head?" He finished for her, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of the last 7 days. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The sight of him standing there in his uniform was enough to shatter her composure. Trey appeared behind her, a beer in his hand. He put a possessive arm around Simone's waist. "Everything okay, babe?" he asked, trying to sound tough. He looked Marcus up and down, a dismissive sneer on his face. Marcus ignored him completely. He looked only at Simone. "You have 60 seconds to gather your personal belongings and vacate my property," he said, his tone flat and devoid of emotion. Simone laughed, a high, nervous sound. "Your property? Marcus, this is our home. You can't just kick me out. You abandoned me." She was already falling back on her script, the one she'd rehearsed for his mother. "This gentleman is Gary," Marcus said, gesturing to the process server. "He has some documents for you." Gary stepped forward and handed the thick envelope to Simone. Her hands trembled as she took it. "You're being served with divorce papers," Gary said in a monotone voice, "as well as a legal notice to vacate the premises, effective immediately. This property is the sole and separate asset of Marcus Collins." Simone's face went white. She ripped open the envelope, her eyes scanning the legal jargon. She looked from the papers to Marcus, her expression a mixture of disbelief and fury. "You can't do this. I have rights. I live here." "You were a guest here," Marcus corrected her gently. "A guest who, on Wednesday at 2:14 p.m., paid ACME Locksmith $285 using our joint emergency credit card to illegally change the locks on my house. That's called intent to oust, Simone. It's a felony." He pulled his phone from his pocket and showed her the screen, the locksmith receipt glowing in the evening light. He had repeated her own actions back to her as evidence. That was the moment she broke. The color drained from her face. She had been caught so completely and utterly by her own arrogance. She had believed he was a quitter, a simple, unambitious man she could easily manipulate. She had never imagined he was capable of this kind of cold, strategic action. She had underestimated him. That was her fatal mistake. "Get out," Marcus said again, his voice still quiet, but now with an edge of command. "Both of you." Trey, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. "Hey, man, you can't talk to her like that." Marcus finally turned his gaze to him. He didn't say a word. He just looked at him. A long, level stare that communicated everything. He was a man who had spent the day dealing with life and death. A man in a uniform that commanded respect. Trey, in his designer jeans and tight t-shirt, suddenly looked small and foolish. He took a step back. Simone started to cry, the tears theatrical and loud. "Marcus, please, we can talk about this. I was scared. I was lonely. I made a mistake." He felt nothing. The man who had loved her was gone, burned away by the events of the past week. All that was left was a man who wanted his home back. "The police will be here in 10 minutes to escort you off the property if you are not gone," he said calmly. "Gary will wait with me to ensure the order is followed." He stepped aside, holding the door open. The message was clear. The time for talk was over. It was time for consequences. The collapse was swift and total. Simone's pleading quickly morphed into rage as the reality of her situation sank in. "You bastard!" she screamed, her voice echoing in the quiet suburban street. "You planned this. You spied on me." "I didn't have to spy, Simone," Marcus said, his voice remaining level. "You broadcasted it." He gestured to the Ring doorbell next to the freshly painted front door. Her eyes followed his gesture, and a new wave of horror washed over her as she understood. She had been the star of her own downfall. Trey, seeing the battle was lost, made a quick retreat. He mumbled something about getting his things and scurried back inside. Emerging a few minutes later with the 2 cardboard boxes he had so confidently carried in just 2 days prior. He didn't make eye contact with Marcus as he loaded them into the back of his $43,000 BMW. He got in the car, reversed out of the driveway, and drove away without a backward glance, leaving Simone standing on the porch, alone. Mark was a quitter, she had believed. But it was Trey who had run at the first sign of real trouble. Left with no allies, Simone's demeanor crumbled completely. The angry, defiant woman was replaced by a weeping, pathetic figure. She tried to grab Marcus's arm. "Please, Mark, don't do this to me. I have nowhere to go. I love you." He pulled his arm away gently. "You have your parents' number," he said. "You have 60 seconds left." He turned and walked to the edge of his lawn, his back to her, presenting a wall of uniformed indifference. Gary, the process server, stood by the door, a silent, official witness. The message was clear. There was no appeal. The next few days were a deluge of frantic, escalating messages. It started with angry texts, a barrage of accusations and insults that lit up his phone. 7:08 p.m., "You are a monster. I can't believe you would do this to me." 7:30 p.m., "My lawyer will destroy you. You'll be sorry." Then, the tone shifted to justification. 9:15 p.m., "I was lonely. You were never here. You pushed me away with your moods." 11:40 "Trey was just a friend. You blew this all out of proportion. You're insecure." By Saturday morning, it had devolved into desperate pleading, a series of voicemails, each more unhinged than the last. The first was tearful. "Baby, please call me. We can fix this. I made a terrible mistake. I miss you. I miss us." The second was frantic. "Marcus, my parents are kicking me out. They're on your side. Where am I supposed to go? You can't just leave me homeless." The consequences cascaded quickly. Her attempt to secure a high-powered lawyer failed when the initial retainer fee was quoted at $15,000, money she simply did not have. Her credit cards were maxed out from years of funding her lavish lifestyle. Her parents, devout church members who were horrified by her actions and the blatant disrespect she'd shown her husband, gave her an ultimatum: get a second job, start paying them rent for her old childhood bedroom, or find somewhere else to live. The life of luxury she had built was a house of cards, and Marcus had just pulled out the single card holding it all up: his quiet, steady income, and the roof he provided. The downfall for Trey was just as severe. Anita Moore, Marcus's lawyer, was ruthlessly efficient. She hired a private investigator for a fee of $2,000 who discovered that Trey's very important finance job was at the same company as Simone's. Their affair was a clear violation of company policy. An anonymous, carefully worded email was sent to their HR department, complete with screenshots of Simone's social media, where she had foolishly posted pictures with Trey, time-stamped during work hours when they were supposed to be on client calls. Within a week, Trey was fired for cause. His leased BMW was repossessed 2 months later. Simone lost everything: her home, her relationship, and eventually her job. The scandal at work made her position untenable. She was quietly let go a month after Trey with a paltry severance package of $5,000. The last Marcus heard, she was working as a hostess at a chain restaurant in a different county, living in a cramped apartment with 2 roommates. The $700 shoes and $2,400 dresses were replaced by a polyester uniform and sensible, non-slip shoes. She had lost the life she felt she deserved because she had failed to appreciate the man who had given it to her. Her entire world, built on a foundation of lies and entitlement, had been dismantled, not by cruelty, but by the simple, unavoidable weight of her own choices. 6 months later, the house felt like his again. The silence was no longer heavy with unspoken resentment. It was peaceful. Marcus had systematically purged every trace of Simone. He donated her expensive clothes to a women's shelter, sold the Lexus, and gave the $8,000 profit to his mother, and replaced the $1,200 memory foam mattress with a simpler, firmer model that cost half as much. The house breathed easier, and so did he. His life found a new rhythm, one centered on purpose and growth. He had taken the promotion after all, becoming captain of his shift at the North Charlotte station. The extra $12,000 a year didn't go to designer handbags. It went into his retirement fund and a savings account for a new roof. He found he had a talent for teaching, for shaping the next generation of paramedics. He took 2 new EMT trainees under his wing, a bright-eyed young woman named Keisha and a quiet, earnest young man named David. He found joy in mentoring them, in passing down the hard-won wisdom of his years on the job. He taught them not just the procedures, how to intubate a patient or administer epinephrine, but the art of it. How to talk to a frightened parent, how to hold the hand of a dying man with dignity, how to find compassion in the midst of chaos. He saw the same spark of service in them that he felt in himself, and nurturing it felt more rewarding than any material possession he had ever owned. One sunny Saturday afternoon, he was on his front porch with Keisha and David, going over emergency cardiac care protocols. Keisha, a young black woman with her hair in intricate braids that clicked softly when she moved, was sharp and intuitive. "So the dosage is different for pediatric patients, right, Captain?" she asked, her brow furrowed in concentration. "That's right," Marcus said, smiling. "You always have to double-check your math. No room for error." His front porch, once the stage for his greatest humiliation, had been transformed. He had spent a weekend building long wooden planter boxes, a project that cost him about $200 in lumber and supplies. He had filled them with rich soil and planted a garden, tomatoes, peppers, basil, and mint. The scent of fresh earth and growing things filled the air. The act of planting, of nurturing new life from a tiny seed, felt like a metaphor for his own journey. He was cultivating his own peace, one day at a time. His mother came by for dinner every Sunday now. She would sit on the porch swing, her luminous, deep brown skin glowing in the afternoon light, and watch him tend his plants. "You look happy, baby," she said one evening, her voice full of warmth. "You look like yourself again." He was. He was a man defined not by who he was with, but by who he was. A man of service, a mentor, a son. A man who found wealth not in the price tag of his possessions, but in the richness of his purpose. In the end, he learned that some things have to be completely destroyed to be rebuilt stronger. A house can be cleansed, a heart can be mended, and a life can find new meaning in the quiet work of helping others. True strength isn't about never falling, it's about how you get back up, how you tend your own garden, and how you choose to grow in the space that betrayal leaves behind. What do you think is the most important quality in a partner? Is it ambition, stability, or something else entirely? Share your thoughts below. And let's continue the conversation about what truly makes a relationship rich.